Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sprites of Life podcast. I'm Lucas. There's no Chris.
And I'm Don.
Yeah, so with the holidays over, Chris had to attend a holiday party, so he just left you and me to hang out and run this episode. So this should be fun.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good time.
When was the last time leaving two Floridians unattended has ever led to anything bad?
Only good things.
Only good things can happen. So today, I figured that we kind of focus on your one of your strengths, Don. I'll be honest with you. There are many animals that I know. I don't know a lot of them in detail, but there's one animal that you know way better than I do. And while we were doing some digging into like future episodes, I realized there's a lot of deer Pokemon.
Yeah, there's quite a few actually. And then we're gonna argue about one because I don't think it is, if you think it is.
Look, I'm just saying that like everyone gets on their case about another monkey, another beetle. And like, no, listen, there's like
There's a lot of cats.
a lot of cats and dogs, but like no one talks about the sheer number of deer or deer-based like organisms that are out there. Otherwise, like it's just one of those things that I feel should be brought to notice. So today, let's talk about deer. Let's talk about these cervids and see how they relate to the real ones. I feel you have some words to share about this topic.
Yeah, I really like deer. I do a little bit of deer hunting here and there.
But I mean, before we get to that, we should probably get to the news. And I did find a news article about everyone's favorite animal. Say it with me, audience. Parasitoid wasps. Oh, you know you love them. Ah, such wonderful creatures. Did you ever hear that there might be more parasitoid wasp species than beetles?
I think I have heard that actually.
Yeah, no, there's no like there's like a thoughts on it and like papers written on it, but this one is more so about it caught my attention because it's Brazil and that's one of my like keywords. So apparently most parasitoid wasps are found in milder climates. Now this usually throws people for a loop because usually when you think of exotic creatures that like infect other creatures with their young and feed caterpillars to their babies from the inside out. You think tropical, you think like Indonesia or Malaysia, somewhere where no one's gonna find them. But most of them are found in milder climates, so more like the U.S. Europe makes sense. But this group of researchers went up to some specific mountains in Brazil, and one in particular, they found over 100 new species of Darwin wasp, which are a group of parasitoid wasps. So this was a pretty interesting find. They went and set up a whole bunch of traps, and they started collecting a lot of the different bugs out there. When they did, they found not only a bunch of new leaf bugs and a couple of new fireflies, they found many different new species of parasitoid wasp. Now, what does that mean? Well, it honestly just shows that there's a lot more that people don't realize lives out there, and it does extend the range of these organisms. And I think it's just really cool to think about people still discovering that many new species at once. Like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, the like the sheer diversity of some stuff like that, like with the parasitoid wasps, is it's really not like a group of critters you think about other than occasionally like a Discovery Channel special about parasites and you go, ew.
Yeah.
But it's really incredible just how many there are.
I was just looking at that. So apparently, there are more species of parasitoid wasps than there are species of both mammals and birds combined. About, I think, 25,000 different of the Darwin moth, of the Darwin variety of parasitoid moth,
What a
wasp.
great specialization to go into is to be like the number one scientist on that type of wasp. Just every other day, you're like, found another one.
I mean, like the
You run out
catfish
of
guy
things
is
to name
probably.
them.
I mean, I'm sure they did like those poor catfish guys in the Amazon River who just had to give up. Like they just can't. Like there's too many. Like both, like the parasitoid wasp guy and the catfish guy, they're eating good. They're like the few scientists in a mansion because they never run out of work. Literally, the dude just built a mansion up on the Brazilian mountainside just to do his work from all the research money he got. I mean, it is also nice to know that someone cares about wasps because one of the other studies you'll find is that people don't write enough papers about wasps because nobody likes wasps and it's hard to get funding or attention for wasps. I mean, they are still like, pollinators and stuff. Not the parasitoid ones. They just spread death. Speaking of death in a unique fashion, nice little segue there to Arcanine and its unstoppable reign of terror on the competitive community.
Yeah, so Arcanine, or specifically Hisuian Arcanine, has kind of been on a crazy tear this year lately in competitive. I think it's had won 5 major events in a row, which is kind of insane, honestly.
Has there ever been a Pokemon that has done that before?
I'm sure Incineroar has, but the fact that it's this many close together, and on top of just being sort of like in a format where Urshifu is the most used Pokemon, specifically Urshifu Water, the fact that you can be 4x weak to Water and be slower than the thing is incredible. So, but like when you look at the meta outside of that, like a lot of teams are Tornadus plus Urshifu, with every team having multiple things, at least one and normally multiple things weak to Rock, and like we don't really have a strong Rock attacker. Like there are things that are using Rock Slide, but they don't have that stab Rock damage.
I think the last like powerful rock type I've seen in competitive was Colossal. Like that was the one that seemed, or Nihilego. That came out a lot last generation. But not, yeah, you're right. Not too many big rock
Yeah,
types
we had
out there.
Tyranitar won a regional early in this format, but since then it's kind of fallen off again. It was kind of a one-off win, as much as I love Tyranitar. But yeah, and a lot of the Arcanines tend to be choice banded, so you have that choice band extreme speed. You got also they're running head smash now, which I know how much you like big numbers, and choice band
A
head
big
smash
number.
is a big
Big
number.
number with no like recoil. Yeah, yeah, I
No,
like big
you're
number.
running it with intimidate. You're getting the recoil.
Really? They just go it. They're just
Yeah,
going hog wild.
intimidate and doubles. Just that double stat drop is just too useful. We did just have the Latin American International though a couple weeks back now on the 19th, and Arcanine won with a pretty standard tailwindy team. But the second place team was cool. We saw Regieleki.
Hey, he's back. He's alive.
Yeah, and it was a very cool, like very like Regieleki plus Tailwind plus Chi-Yu Fluttermane, so very just click Electro Web and big damage kind of thing. And it was kind of cool to see Regieleki back in form. Third place we had another Arcanine. Chi-Yu Dragonite is staying good. Looking at things, Roaring Moon's kind of been on a come up as well, and a Regidraco was in top 8.
Whoa, Red, my boy, my dragony boy. Oh, I love him so. I mean, every time I think of Hisui Arcanine at this point, though, I'm like that quote from SpongeBob of like everyone getting angry at it winning. Like, he poisoned our water supply, burned down our crops, and delivered a plague onto our houses. Like, everyone just like, for some reason, this dog seems to be doing more damage than the literal living embodiment of lightning, like undead monsters from the past. It's just who would win in the fight, these untold horrors or one rock dog?
It's also kind of well actually it was on like half of the teams in top 8 at LIC. I was saying a lot of the times too, there won't be that many of them in top cut, but it just always wins.
Gotta be some way, somehow. I don't know. That's it's crazy to me that this Pokemon is the one that made it to the top. Of all the powerful hitters added to the DLC from the DLC and stuff, that this is the one to do it. And I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah, I think the highest speaking of other DLC critters, well Ogre Ponds, we had an Ogre Pond in second. The next Hisuiemon though was in 10th on an Ursaluna on a Trick Room team.
We were so scared of that bear. We were so worried about the bear. We
No,
should have been
and like
looking for the
that,
dog.
yeah, we should have been looking for the other bear,
The other bear.
the Kung Fu bear.
It's interesting too because I know that the guy who runs Cerebi and a couple of other people got a chance to run a demo for the new DLC, and they got to say like, "Oh yeah, no, Expanding Force is back," and everyone's like toes curled for a second to think of all the big number damage.
But yeah, we've got quite a few. We've got some exciting. Yeah, we've got some of the move tutor moves are coming back. I hear we're gonna have some new TMs. I know some personal fan favorites like Whimsicott and Metagross and Smeargle will be returning as well. So that's some exciting things from the competitive mindset, and just a couple of Pokemon I like also.
You just casually drop that dog's name like it doesn't scare slash make everyone like.
Oh, also Incineroar's back.
Oh yeah, I mean Incineroar is back. I'm wondering how he's gonna do compared.
Well,
Like he's got some
he's
new
going to
competitive.
do well.
Yeah, stupid cat.
If anything, I think Terra just benefits it.
I mean, but we have Smeargle back, and the combinations you can run now are somehow even more dangerous than before. I mean, hear me out though. Gravity, um, gravity with Sandy Shocks combined now with Dark Void again. So actually, you might be
I
able to
don't
bring
think
back
it
the
even
glory
can
days.
use Dark Void anymore. Actually, I think it like physically doesn't work.
Oh, that is brutal, but like fair. So we'll probably talk more about the DLC because it's coming out in 2 weeks. So we'll definitely give people a rundown on that one. Most likely this is the next episode of the one after. For now, we got to talk about deer. Um, with my experience of deer, it's weird because most of it comes from the fact that okay, at the aquarium I work at, we have something called the trading post. And the trading post is a program where people can bring us things from the wild, shells and rocks and all kinds of things. In return, they get points in order to use those points to buy other things. So if someone brings in shark teeth, they get points and they can use them for shells. We do offer a bounty of sorts for skulls. And there are a number of people who love going hunting out in Charleston, South Carolina, who will just bring us back deer skulls. Not all of them in the best condition.
Oh, that could be pretty. I would imagine that could be pretty rough.
We take their points and throw those skulls in the dumpster, but occasionally they get us a clean one, and those go fast because we love getting a chance to see them. And people will always ask us, "How do you know it's a deer?" Just by like the skull and the teeth and all that stuff. And it's really cool because the cervids do make up about 55 species on Earth, which compared to the wasps isn't exactly a lot. But it is interesting how this one herbivore, this one section of grass eating, brush eating creatures has such an impact on human culture. Like not just from like a hunting standpoint, but I mean, go to the people who go to Ren fairs dressed up as deer. Go to the people in ancient times who have them on coat of arms. The deer have been I mean, look at Fire Emblem Three Houses for Pete's sake. Like we have the deer at the symbol on so many different things.
Yeah, we have deer and like elk and other cervids. Really like especially I feel like deer and elk or like stags, which is generally members of those two groups as well. And like the European coat of arms and stuff. It's pervasive in the pop culture. Game of Thrones, you had the Baratheons had, I believe, a stag or an elk or a deer. Yeah, they really just have been throughout human culture, throughout the world. There's cave paintings of deer and other cervids like that. There's just like, I think there's something about them that's always sort of been tied in with humanity a little bit.
All the cervids are under the family Cervidae. It includes the deer, elk, reindeer, and moose. Weirdly enough, we still haven't gotten a moose yet, which is weird considering how big and iconic they are. But no, I'm sure they'll get to it.
When we get the Canadian region, we'll have
Yeah,
moose.
we'll get the close cousins to the cows. They are closely related to the bovines, and they are ruminants just like them. There are some key differences when it comes to both their feet and how they operate, as well as their headwear. They have antlers. They do not have horns. The biggest difference between the two, antlers are made out of bone, and they are shed off typically by the organism once a certain set of the season is done. There are exceptions, give or take, right? There's some weird exceptions here or there.
Honestly, off the top of my head, I cannot think of an
I
exception.
think there was like one or two of them that had like some different shedding behavior, but for the mass majority of them, they will shed those off. They will fall to the ground. It's gross, but it's a necessary part in order not to weigh them down when they don't need them. They're typically going to be used as mating display because usually only the males get them. There are some cases where females will get them as well. That means that it's usually going to be more for defense. Meanwhile, the horns, it's going to be made out of keratin and it will have a bony sheath where it goes over it. So this is why you can pick up antlers falling off skulls. It's not a huge deal. Whereas horns, if you cut that off, it ain't going back. It ain't gonna come back. No way, no how.
Yeah, deer antlers are actually specifically elk and moose antlers are actually the fastest growing bone in the animal kingdom and can grow like up to an inch per day at their peak.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that go that fast. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's why a lot of cervids, particularly elk, the lifespan of a male and a female are drastically different. Like a female elk can live to be over 20 years, like a male elk that's 5 or 6 is getting up there. Just because basically every year, think about their leach a ton of calcium out of their bones to go into the antlers, and then they proceed to fight.
That's like how like girl math became a thing? That's guy math right there. Like minus all the calcium to plus up your antlers and then hurt each other. Lose lifespan, yeah, but for the fight though. And now, one thing that's important about these animals is that a lot of people will bring up the question, well, why haven't we started domesticating them? Why don't we have them like in farms like cows if they're related? And they do break one of the major rules of domestication in that they are ridiculously skittish, anxious creatures. They do not like to be, going near anyone or anything in most cases. They are not going to do well in fences or cages, and so they don't do well as domesticated animals. It's why most of them are hunted instead of like farmed. Although there are exceptions where people will like fence in an area for the deer to live in, but I don't that doesn't count. You're just
Yeah,
keeping them closed in.
there are commercial deer farms, but from what I understand, it's a little more hands off than cattle farming would be.
Yeah, no, the only exception I know is the reindeer, which we will get to in a bit. So deer are a common prey item, hence the skittishness. They are prey items for large predators across the world. They're only not found in Antarctica and Australia. In order to avoid being eaten by, wolves and bears and the occasional lion, they have a very keen sense of smell and hearing in order to keep themselves alive. Not only that, they have an amazing set of endurance that'll just keep them running for hours if they need to in order to get away. And if they're running through the forest, which many of the species are, they're very nimble at making their way through it. What they really lack in speed, though, like I said, is that endurance, that ability to just keep going. The only reason they lose to people is that humans have even more endurance. And if they tire themselves out of fear and panic, the humans can just keep tracking them. It's why humans have been able to hunt them for thousands and thousands of years, as we figured out that their endurance level isn't as high as ours. But in their case, their best defense is to get as much distance away from a predator as possible. Now, Don, question: uh, if deer are cornered, are they going to continue to try running away, or are they going to try and fight back on something larger?
Depending on the situation, deer of both sexes can definitely be dangerous and will defend themselves. I mean, a lot of people a year are killed by deer, the vast majority of which are auto accidents. But people definitely have been either gored by bucks, particularly during the rut, which is like their mating season, where their testosterone is very high. And like some situations like that can happen. Does as well, and other deer will kind of rear up and basically box you with their front hooves, which is not good in my understanding.
It doesn't sound great considering the thing weighs several hundred pounds.
I mean, that would be, yeah, several hundred pounds at least for an American whitetail.
Yeah, American. Well, I'm not talking about a key deer.
Yeah, but I mean that would be a big white. That would be a big deer. But yeah, no, deer can definitely be dangerous, and they definitely will fight back if cornered, or like I said during the rut when they're well, that's when the males, the bucks, are fighting.
I actually do know this statistic because we were looking it up for Shark Week at work. Is about 175 people are killed by deer in America, making them the deadliest animal in America, even more so than mosquitoes. And yes, it's mostly cars. With deer being such a huge part of human culture, it's really interesting to see how so many different places across the world have kind of them in as part of their not only heraldry but also a lot of their myths and legends. Like some people have claimed that I know in ancient China, deers were seen as messengers of the gods. In others, they are seen as guardians of the forest. A lot of people, when they're doing Fey style makeup or like Fey style worship, they'll ornament themselves as deer. There was even a horror movie fairly recently that had like the monster was like some cryptid deer based horror like that guarded the
Are
woods.
you talking about the ritual with the like Jouten or whatever that is?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, I think that's a like a Nordic spirit that I want to say they typically have antlers. I know it did in the movie, if I remember right.
Yeah, no, there's just something about that we connect the deer and the forest, and we connect them as guard. I mean, think of Princess Mononoke. Like that movie, like had the deer spirit running everything too. There's such an interesting tie to them as connections of not even just like part of the forest, as the forest themselves, given how much they live in it. And it's amazing how our cultures have tied and worked with them like even to this day. Like yes, if you go back you'll see all the different heraldries of the deers on the shields and all the different like deers on the cave painting walls, but like even to this day I looked up how much money is generated through like the hunting of deer and like all the stuff that goes with it. It's over 11 billion dollars of revenue. That is an obscene amount of money, but like it's all made in part, and much of that money goes back to helping keep that area safe. And in some cases hunting deer has become necessary, right?
Yeah, so deer are kind of a really great success story, honestly, to get a little bit of a sidetrack. In the early 1900s and in the 1800s, market hunting, at least in the United States, was a big deal where people would go out and hunt deer and ducks or any other wild game and go sell them to restaurants. And this resulted in just sort of like the populations being decimated to the point where deer in like the early 1900s they were believed to like probably less than 215,000 deer across the United States in the early 1900s, and that was right after the passing of the Lacey Act in 1900, which prohibited the interstate transport of like wild game and sort of really brought the end to market hunting. So deer went from being sub 250,000, and now there's estimated to be about 35 million deer in the United States. It's sort of a multifold result because on one hand we have like the more robust conservation measures in place. At the same time, across much of the U.S., the sort of the deer's native predators have unfortunately been eradicated, like wolves. Some places are trying to reestablish that. And then the introduction of a lot of really large scale agriculture. Deer sort of love big agriculture, especially corn and things like that, very high calorie, densely packed. So things like several factors, we've just really seen a huge explosion in deer numbers.
And it's important to realize that it's not all deer as well. Like take the key deer down in Florida. It has to deal with loss of habitat, roadkill, and in the past it was overhunted, and its population is still, trying to get back up there given how small they are. For those who don't know what a key deer is, think of your classic white-tailed deer or whatever, and just think of it as tiny. It's itty bitty. It's very
Yeah,
cute.
they're a subspecies of the just the American white-tailed deer, which is like the really super big example of Bergman's rule, which I know I talk about a lot, but it's like deer are really the extreme example. Key deer, it's like a 50-pound deer. It's like a medium-sized dog. And then the farther north you go, they're all white-tailed deer, even when they're subspecies. They just steadily get larger up until you get into like the northern United States and Canada, where you're looking at deer like that can easily break 200 pounds. Like they might as well be different animals at that point, but they're all still white-tailed deer.
Really? So they're all still part of the same, subspecies? Like, they all start part of the same species, just okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
they
I
could
didn't
all
realize that.
theoretically interbreed and stuff. Yeah, and then as well as like things like the Coues deer in like the American Southwest and Mexico. They're all sort of just like slight variants on the white-tailed deer.
No, 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 we got yeah, no, that's a good segue to talking about getting to the Pokemon part of this, because as we said, there's a surprisingly large number of deer, and I guess we gotta start with the first deer, and that has to go to Stantler. Now, when you go through Stantler's Pokédex entry, it talks about how let's see here, its antlers subtly change the flow of air to create a strange space where reality is distorted. Can they? I don't know. Can deer distort reality with their antlers?
No, cannot distort. I mean, they can't distort reality in the traditional sense. Maybe it has a little bit to do with the sort of So I think they found. I'm trying to remember where it was. I was reading the other day about an area, but I think deer antlers, like we've said before, sort of have always had a sort of like mystique or power to people. I think they found. Trying to remember when it was. It was very old. Though, like sort of caveman times. They found evidence that in one cave where they thought it was initially just like a bone site, and then they realized that all of the skeletons there, particularly like the heads, were the skulls of larger examples than average of that animal species. So it was clear that ever since the beginning of time, people have seen big antlers and ascribed some level of significance to that.
I mean, it's even in the Legends of Arceus, like Pokedex entry, how people were grind up the black orbs from the fallen antlers as effective treatment for insomnia. Like people have used deer antlers medicine throughout
Which is
ancient.
really funny because Stantler does learn hypnosis.
Of course it does. Yeah, no, that was one of its, I remember from the anime, that was, like, one of its things was, like, people there was an episode where people were seeing a herd of Stantlers when it was just one Stantler hypnotizing everybody into thinking that it was a herd of them because it missed its family. I remember that
But yeah,
specifically.
and it does mention the how its antlers are valuable, and that's the thing we see now. People will actually go out and collect the shed antlers of deer and elk to then resell for like either art decorations or dog treats. Actually, is a big market for that as well.
Would that be bad for, like, the soil? Like, the enriching of the
So
calcium?
the calcium the really things that love the calcium are like things like mice and squirrels love to come and chew on them particularly. But there is some concerns with that in that it's resulted in a lot more people going out in the winter when the deer have shed their antlers.
Oh.
And that like the amount of extra people in the woods when they're trying to conserve calories, maybe potentially putting a little unnecessary stress on them. So that is a slight concern, especially in like northern states where they really need those energy reserves.
That's so weird how like one little balance like that, like one little change of the market could like drive them off and add more stress.
Yeah, that and there's always been a market for there's also a big market for the velvet, which is what the blood vessel rich sort of outer layer is on deer antlers while they're growing them. That's believed to have a lot of medicinal properties when like powdered and ground. There's like deer farms where they basically harvest the antlers from the deer when they're still in velvet so that they can harvest the velvet from them. I think it's supposed to be very dense and I mean I think it's supposed to be very rich in a lot of nutrients. Given the speed that antlers grow, I wouldn't be surprised if it was pretty dense.
So which deer do you think Stantler is based on?
Right, yeah. So Stantler being from Johto, which was the I think it's the Kansai region of Japan, which is what Johto is based on. And that contains, I believe, the famous Nara Park with the Nara Park deer, the bowing deer.
Oh yes.
So the bowing deer are a Sika, most of them are Sika deer or Sika deer, depending on how you want to pronounce. There's a different one also. But if you look at a Sika deer, Sika, the antler morphology is not too dissimilar from Stantlers, more facing head on though than sideways.
Oh, I know these deer very well. One of the things that a lot of people did during their time abroad is they always try and stop over at the Nara Park and over to feed the batting deer. I didn't want to do it just because I don't really want to be part of feeding like wild animals. Like I guess they're pretty tamed at
Fairly
this
wild
point.
animals from what I've seen.
Yeah, I know. But also, have you seen you've seen the videos of like the deer bowing and like being respectful? Yeah, those are super edited. Like those deer will jump you for those crackers.
I
They are
believe
not
that.
they will absolutely wreck you for those crackers. You're not getting one deer bowing. You're getting a bunch of deers bowing to headbutt you. You're getting bombarded like 4 or 5 at a time. If you're going to plan on doing the Nara Deer Park, be prepared for those deer to be jerks.
Oh no, I appreciate that. So yeah, a couple other little things about the Sika deer. In addition to that, the Sika deer, I think they're a pretty visually interesting deer. They have sort of a more elk-like antler. It's a little wider, but it also doesn't have the sort of like width or the beams, I guess you could say, of like a more American deer. But they're one of the group of deer where they're called a male is a stag and a female is a hind, as opposed to a buck and a doe. There's Cervus, which is within Cervidae. I believe members of the genus Cervus are stags and hinds, whereas other members are deer. And then there's the case of elk and moose, where you have to do with its bulls and cows.
Gotcha. Okay, just people naming things to be weird. Got it.
So yeah, Cervus is the genus of deer that are primarily native to Eurasia, and most Eurasian deer are referred to as stags and hinds, to the point where in the I believe it was the 12 labors of Hercules, he had to go out and catch a silver hind or something like that. But yeah, if you look at their antlers, they have similar antlers in style to the other some of the other European deer, like the red deer. And the Sika deer, there's a lot of subspecies of them actually throughout various parts of East Asia, up into parts of Russia. Can interbreed, similar to sort of how white-tailed deer are. And throughout much of their range, they've been extirpated or are in very low numbers from just hunting, primarily. A little bit of habitat loss, but primarily hunting, except in Japan where they're kind of just overabundant. They're having a
Oh yeah,
great time
no.
in Japan.
Yeah, no, it very much reminds me of like the Burmese python situation where like the Burmese pythons in like China and like India are like, man, like we keep getting hunted for our skins. We're lowering in numbers. This sucks. Wonder what happened to the ones who got dragged to Florida. Meanwhile, in Florida, nothing could stop us. We are like gods.
Yeah, and also Sika deer have been introduced across a lot of the United States as sort of as a game animal. A lot of Europe, from like Estonia, Latvia, Austria, I'm not going to list all the countries: Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Switzerland, Russia, Romania, everything like that, all down through Australia and New Zealand. They're in the Philippines. They're in Canada. They're in parts of the United States like Delaware and Kansas, and I know Maryland has them. I've actually seen them in Maryland before. Yeah, they like the marshy habitat of like the Chesapeake Marsh areas and stuff is apparently where they like to live. And they're a smaller deer.
I was literally like less than an hour away in my old apartment, like in Japan. I was less than an hour away from these deer. I did not realize I was that close. Holy crap.
Oh, really? You were that close?
Yeah, I was that close. I could have just gone and checked him out and got headbutt. All right, I didn't mean to go on your tangent.
Oh
Go
no,
start
no,
your
saying
tangent.
but yeah, they've been kept often as ornamental animals too because they're a very striking deer and they're on the smaller side. But they've also just, like, been introduced as game kinda throughout the world.
Right. I mean, I think that's a pretty good start. I mean, just specifically since they were doing it in Osaka region, so of course they're going to go and use the one most famous deer in Osaka. And I mean, we're going to get to weird deer eventually, but I still love how this is the Pokemon that everyone is like, all right, that's the reindeer Pokemon from now on, at least until we get another one. Like if you see any of the Pokemon stuff, like of some of a Santa esque like anything, it's usually going to have a Stantler riding in the front of it.
Yeah,
But
and I will say too, they've actually been, they're quite the, invasive problem in places where they've been established. In Europe, they were found to be, like one of the most damaging mammals to the environment alongside they put them on tiers with the brown rat and muskrat for invasive mammals, which is, like, pretty bad invasive mammals to have.
all right. So I feel like this one you didn't have any problems with. Like this one's a good deer, good starting point. But the next deer we got was Gen 5, and that's Sawsbuck. And Sawsbuck, I mean, it's the America region, so of course they're gonna add a deer to it, right?
Yeah, I would think so at least. Yes, we have Sawsbuck. Well, I will say one from a design standpoint, I like Sawsbuck. I like his season theme. I get that it's like summer, autumn, winter, spring buck. Like that's a fun name. I assume that's what like the origin of his name type of thing is. But in like so in the United States, like we have several species of deer as well as elk and moose. But like I guess like, typically the most American deer is probably like most people say is like the white-tailed deer. It's sort of like when you see deer in a movie, ideally, it's in America, it's the white-tailed deer, unless you're the Deer Hunter or The Last of the Mohicans or a lot of other movies where they substitute the Eurasian red deer for them, and that annoys me a lot.
Is there a reason? Is it just like how they replace a bald eagle cry with a hawk cry,
It
or
could I do think maybe it's a thing where they decide that the American version's not striking enough. So maybe there's a little bit of that. Maybe there could also be, for benefit of the doubt, I'll say maybe there's some issues with the Lacey Act and transporting a live deer like over state lines or something if you need a an actor deer or something. So maybe there's a bit of that, but
the idea that the white-tailed deer isn't striking enough is very strange to me, given the sheer magnitude of white-tailed deer-based merchandise available in this country. Like, especially for people who go hunting them recreationally. Like, there are plenty of people who disagree.
But yeah, I think maybe I phrased that poorly. I think it might have to do too with, maybe you want your movie to be bigger and more exotic, and you've lived in America, you've seen the white-tailed deer, it's like what you're accustomed to. Versus like I've met people from countries where they don't have raccoons, and they come here and they see a raccoon and they lose their mind because they're like, oh my god, it's like an animal you've never seen. So I could maybe see that sort of that with deer, where then they see a Eurasian deer like a red stag, and they're like, oh, that's such an impressive animal. And then at the same, they go outside and there's a deer eating their bushes and they're annoyed about it. So like maybe there's a little bit of that.
That made me laugh a bit because yeah, I the zoo I went to in Osaka had the raccoon in the exotic animal like habitat and I couldn't
I mean, if you
stop
think about a
laughing.
raccoon and you lived somewhere that didn't have raccoons, it's kind of a crazy animal.
It's such a weird little
It's
dude.
got little hands. It's like a weird little dude. It's like a monkey, but not.
It's a monkey rat.
It's
It's
like a
not something
monkey
they would.
dog rat combo.
But from everything I'm reading in like the Pokédex entry, all it really talks about is how this Pokemon is like a symbol for the seasons. It doesn't really mention much else about it. Aside from the fact that, okay, here in the Springs form, it says it seems that a sawbuck with many flowers on its antlers will grow at a slightly slower pace because the flowers absorb the Pokemon's nutrients.
I like that a lot, actually.
Because that goes back to the calcium. That's the calcium thing we just talked about. Like, I mean, like also the summer form has the thicker and larger branches, the more majestic it is. That would be so interesting if, like, again, this is Pokemon. It's not going to do it, but that'd be cool. If, like, oh, this one has bigger antlers. It's going to level up a whole lot slower.
Yeah, one thing I do wonder about with Sawsbuck particularly, it makes sense with Stantler because that's such a core part of design, but I believe they started adding in like sex differences in the Pokemon, like between the males and females. Was that Gen 4 or Gen 5?
I think that was Gen 4. I think. Let me go
So
check.
like
I'm
if
gonna go.
that's the case, I'm surprised that they maybe they decided it was too boring of a design if female Sawsbuck didn't have antlers. But of all the different deer Pokemon, I felt like this would be the one that it would make the most sense for there to be like a doe version.
I feel like you could make a doe version for all the seasons, just like add different like for the how like the Sika
They
deer.
could have, like, instead of the, it being on their antlers, they could have, like, a scarf type of deal or something maybe.
I mean, exactly. You can have like different colorations and different forms. Like imagine like the winter form having that white scarf look to them, but with no antlers. It could work. It's just and it's also really not a huge design problem given that it's Pokemon. Anytime they say they can't come up with a design for something, I just call bullcrap because I've seen what they can do when they really want to. We've seen Porygon Z. We know what you are up to.
And I like Sawsbuck a lot. I kind of wish it was better from a competitive standpoint, but the antler shape is once again a little more towards that of a stag, like a Eurasian stag, than an American deer. If you look at like its antlers seem closer to like a Sika deer's antlers than. But if you look at a white-tailed deer's antlers, they go more out to the sides typically. Like their shape's a little different. Same with like a mule deer, the other American deer. But yeah, there's debated how many subspecies of white-tailed deer there are.
I mean, I can imagine, but I see what you're saying. I think they went too heavy into the branch look of it instead of like the antler look of it.
I do like I like Sawsbuck's design. I like the seasonal forms. I almost wish they could have tweaked it and I think it would have been cool if it's secondary typing, if it always stayed grass, but its secondary typing changed with the seasonal form. I think that would have been a really cool Sawsbuck option. And then still let it have chlorophyll. That would have been crazy.
Oh no, if that thing had chlorophyll,
It
like
has
oh hang on, let
chlorophyll.
me
It
go.
has chlorophyll.
Yeah, if we up that attack a little bit higher, maybe give it a different ability. Give it what abilities? Got
Give it
chlorophyll, got sap
chlorophyll's good.
dipper.
Chlorophyll those it has good abilities. The abilities are not the problem with it. That's the worst part. It has no moves.
I'm looking at them. Oh my god, that is sad. Doesn't even get solar blade. I mean, it gets horn leech, which is nice.
Yeah, it doesn't have, like, return or anything now too. It doesn't really have the best normal. It gets high horsepower now. That's something. And it gets play rough. Okay, he's got a few moves now.
He doesn't get solar blade.
He should get Solar Blade.
I mean, like the solar sword move, that's solar beam, but like physical. Like his attacks, he gets solar beam. 60 versus 100. Come on, Pokemon, step your game up. Come on, that's not hard.
But no, I like Sawsbuck though. I think he's a cool other thing, minor deer thing for people, particularly Americans, that are listening. If you see a fawn, a baby deer out like tucked up in a bush or something, it's not abandoned. It's almost definitely not abandoned. When fawns are very young, their mothers will leave them tucked away in high brush or something and then go off to do deer errands and they'll come back.
We've seen the same thing happens in antelopes and weirdly enough manatees. Like they'll just leave them and they'll take care of themselves for a little bit. And if they get eaten by a puma, well, that was nature and that's how it goes. But yeah, I don't know. With deer, people do weird stuff with them, like feed them donuts and strawberries, and I just get really upset. It's like, stop it, please. It's not a pet. It's really not. I promise. There are a lot of them, but they're not pets. Leave them alone.
Yeah, and there is also a concern with deer, at least in particularly United States. I know it showed up in Canada as well. I'm not sure about Asia and Europe, but chronic wasting disease is an issue right now with North American cervids. It's a prion disease like mad cow disease. So that's definitely something. If you do see deer that seem like they're acting weird or like particularly emaciated, definitely call your local fish and game agency or wildlife agency. It's a sort of just a PSA moment, but definitely something that needs to be monitored.
It's a weird thing to tell everyone, like, hey, everyone, find your Department of Natural Resources and save their number because every state you have something to deal with. For us in South
Tell
Carolina,
him you saw a weird deer.
sir, I saw a weird deer, and then just they sigh and just another sighting for the day. I mean, in South Carolina, it's weird deer, the random bear, or an abundance of sea turtles getting hurt on the beach by boats. That's the three things that you can call about in South Carolina. Now there is one deer that I mean when it was introduced, like all we had to do to make it powerful was give it one little power herb and it just started killing everything.
I mean, it's still up until I guess you could say they introduced its natural predator last generation into the ecosystem. We're talking about Xerneas,
You're talking about Zerny.
everyone's
Which
favorite
predator?
Zacian.
Oh god, yes, I remember.
There's a reason why Xerneas went from the king of the restricted formats, literally non-existent in the Dynamax formats. Also because people could Dynamax up and beef through. I think Xerneas in a Terra format is going to be different.
Who wins in a fight? The literal embodiment of life and power or one dog with a metal stick?
Well, the dog with the metal stick just got nerfed this gen too.
I mean, yeah, his ability only works one time per game, but I mean, he can still play him. He's
Yeah,
not dead.
he's still good, but I think Xerneas is gonna come back with a vengeance. I think it benefits from Terra, maybe more so than things benefit from being able to Terra against it, because I mean you can only Terra one thing to resist a Xerneas. And I think it's got some new tools. I think Xerneas with things like Indeedee and stuff could be.
Got lots of offense. Like it's got plenty of moves it can turn. It could turn into a psychic type to avoid a lot of the damage. It can do a lot.
Yeah, psychic, ground could be good, very good for it. I think it wants to turn into things that either resist steel or and beat things that. So I think Terrifier Xerneas actually would be real. You resist steel and you can then hit opposing steel types. So like that could be good. Ground could be good. Maybe something like water also. 'Cause then you resist Kyogre.
Just double down, go Fairy Terra.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure Terra Fairy +2 Geomancy Moonblast does a billion damage. Xerneas will get into the animal side again. I won't complain too much about this because I see in the notes I wrote I'm going to complain, but I already complained about how they substitute Whitetail for them. But Xerneas from the Kalos region, everyone's favorite fairy type, probably not, but it is if you like Pokemon that win. So you can like Xerneas.
Jesus, Don, be nice. Fluttermane's right there now.
Okay, yeah, I'll actually, you know what? Every fairy Pokemon is busted. I take that back. You just like fairy types. They're all good.
Fairy types, like my beef with fairy types has always been the fact that they introduce the cool version of a panda in the same generation where they get destroyed alive by the new type.
Yeah, no, you're right. Fairy types, yeah, all fairy types are good. Zacian, fantastic. Mega Mawile, fantastic. Xerneas, fantastic. Sylveon, sometimes fantastic. All the Tapus, yeah, they're great. Fairy types are very good. Magearna, I could keep listing them. Anyway, though, I'm a Xerneas fan. It's sort of like, as of right now, it's the biggest deer-based Pokemon in terms of, I think, also in-game size, but also what it's based on. Xerneas, its antler morphology, it seems to be very much that of like a Eurasian red stag or an elk.
Yeah, I'll give it to the last of the Mohican people. That is a very majestic sight. I will give them
You
that.
could have used an American elk, though.
Yeah, I'm saying yes. You're not wrong, but I understand where they are coming from. They were wrong. All these pictures are either of them majestically either standing, bellowing like monsters, or having been hunted. So there's a mixed vibe here on the Google images.
The red stag, like I said, it's again it's a it's in the Cervus family within Cervidae, like the Cicadeer. So again, it's a situation of stags and hinds versus bucks and does. The red deer is native to kind of throughout Eurasia, most of Europe into like the Caucasus Mountains, including like Anatolia and like Iran, and then like parts of Western Asia. They're really big. They can reach like 440. So they're well past like an American deer outside of like an elk or a moose.
They'll rip us up. They can definitely do some damage to each other during those
They
mating displays.
absolutely could. They're the fourth largest extant deer species. So it goes mook, elk, and sambar deer. And then it is the red deer slash red stag.
Sorry, I was going through like the Pokedex stuff, and it's like there's really not much to go on when it comes to this creature, and like how like they basically just made it the legendary like symbol of life, and I think that does have a little bit to tie with like the Fae culture and like the ideas like them being guardians of the forest. But I don't know. I mean, I'm glad they kind of made this thing the biggest, scariest deer they could think of, like as far like comparatively to the real deal.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the largest deer, and like the region makes sense because there are red deer in France, whereas there are not moose and elk are either sort moose are kind of circumpolar, elk are like North America, and then the sandbar deer is I believe down in India, and also on one island in Florida. There's a very interesting island in Florida called St. Vincent Island where I think back if I remember my Florida history right, back in the day, they were all sorts of crazy animals on there that this guy put like zebras, and then stuff died out or got hunted out, and then the sandbar stayed, and eventually the state took possession of it, and now it's just an island, and there's also red wolves on the island too.
Really? Oh, that's nice. Those things were almost wiped out. That's
Yes,
good.
I think it's a male and a female. I think they're trying to get them going.
But no, I think the Xerneas was a good addition to the game, just from one, a legendary status, two, a symbol of one of the scariest deers I've ever seen, and three, just a absolute powerhouse once they let that thing onto the field. That thing was a monster.
And if I remember correctly too, in the Norse mythology, at Yggdrasil, or however you say it, the World Tree, there's a stag that hangs out around the base of it, and we see with Zerni's Yveltal and Zygarde are all drawing from Norse mythology, and and there's the stag is I'm gonna butcher this, so I apologize.
No, it's all good.
Ike Bjornir was is the stag that hangs out around the tree. So we see a
Yeah,
little like up the mythological angle from Xerneas. I like that it's the protector, which is a thing we see a lot from deer. I think the rate and growth of the antlers is a big part of how probably like the renewal aspect of deer that we sort of see throughout mythologies.
I guess there would be some if you didn't know what the antlers were or why they were doing it, the idea of something going through that beauty of life and decay, like death and decay, and over again would definitely have impact on a human being who didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, and if you just saw them, if you saw, up into like maybe you don't see them when they lose their antlers. Maybe you just see them one day they have them and one day they don't. And then you're just like, okay, they can just do that.
Yeah, why can't I grow bones out of my head? Why can't I fight with those? It's crazy. But I'm glad this thing is gonna come back because I like seeing some of these horrifyingly dangerous monstrosities go up against some of the new guys, and who knows, maybe like it will still do really really well, or maybe it will be like Reggie Lecky where it's like, yeah, you're cool. Like there's some things that are more dangerous now. I'm still scared of that freaking Smeargle, dude. That thing scares the crap out of me. I don't want the dog. Please, not the dog. Dog based trauma aside, we got one more I think we have time to talk about, and that is our yeah, no, we got I mean it's the holidays. We gotta end up on it. We got Weird Deer. We got the would it be caribou or would it be caribou or reindeer?
So reindeer are basically domesticated caribou. And the fact that we can ride around on deer, I would argue that he's more of a reindeer than a caribou.
So caribou are a type of elk, or what are they their own thing?
So caribou are they're the only so they are in Cervidae, but they're in their own genus.
Ah, okay. I'm looking up their phylogenetic tree and being like, okay, I see where the split's at.
Yeah, yeah, they're a circumpolar species of deer. North America, Northern Europe, Siberia, all that good cold stuff. There's migratory and sedentary species of them. Females may have antlers depending on the subspecies, and they're one of the few deer where the females do have antlers.
Okay, and that's I'm going to assume for protection from bears?
I think wolves are their larger predator if I remember correctly.
I mean, I don't know. I guess a polar bear might try.
I'm sure they would. I think they're more in like the tundra. I mean, I know there's several subspecies of caribou even within North America. There's like a mountain caribou and a bare ground caribou and a tundra caribou or something like that. So there's definitely several subspecies of them. And like I said, some will not have the antlers, but I think generally they're probably, I would imagine wolves and brown bears are probably a bigger predator of them than polar bears are. Just given I think they tend more towards tundras and boreal forests, and also they go down into the Canadian Rockies. Oh yeah, especially like a large male caribou, it's like sort of a mane, which sort of makes sense that when you both have antlers, you need another way to show off. So they'll have like sort of a very like a Fabio-esque thing going on.
No, no. Again, it's a beautiful animal. Like it's absolutely like, and you'll always pull on like National Geographic, and you'll see like them like charging across the tundra, and all the cameramans are losing their minds, like just following these things. Again, beautiful animal. I'm glad they gave Stantler an evolution because you know, I mean, no one was going to use it otherwise. And I mean, even now, like,
And now it too has now Stantler can use Eviolite, which might actually let it do a thing.
I mean, it does get like intimidate, doesn't it? So it's like, yeah, no, that's not too bad.
It gets Intimidate and Trick Room.
Yeah, so perfect. That's a nice little niche for itself. I mean, so is there anything else like when I'm reading the Pokedex entry, like it only gets the one at the moment. So it talks about how the fur sheds from its beard retains heat well and it's highly useful material for winter clothing. I would assume that the mane on a real elk isn't used to like help burst get resistance to cold since it's only the males, right?
Yeah, no, but I would imagine their fur, and definitely is overall, is very, insulating given where they live.
I mean, you'll see them covered in snow and just keep on walking. So yeah, I like, and again, the camouflage of like that white body to like blend into the snow to avoid predators. I do really like as well.
Yeah, they definitely have like, and they sort of have a little bit more of a regional. They migrate in very large groups and they migrate very often.
I mean, it's interesting as well how they kind of went extinct for a while in Pokemon. Like the fact that again, that was the whole thing about like the Legend series with that. Oh, all these ancient Pokemon. Oh, they're all dead.
Oh, so that one interesting thing they found with so male reindeer shed their antlers in early to midwinter, and then after that happens, the antlered cows of the herd take the highest ranks of the feeding
The
hierarchy.
who gets the higher rank?
Once because the males shed their antlers in early midwinter because theirs grow back because they like more consistently because they're fighting for the males fight for dominance and for like mating status and things like that. The cows, though, now the cows that have the antlers, after the males lose theirs, they become the highest tier in the feeding hierarchy, I would imagine, because they can headbutt the other ones. And then to the point where they found that because some of the females will not have antlers, and they found that calves whose mothers do not have antlers are typically have a higher mortality rate and are smaller.
Oh, okay.
So they're
Gotcha.
really benefiting from having the antlered females.
Oh, good for them. Gotta get a tough mom to help you get in front of the line for the best grass. This Pokemon kind of took all the psychic powers of a Stantler and just turned them up to 11. So I'm going to assume that these ones once again do not have magic powers, but people assume that they do.
So reindeer actually have a little bit of a history with hallucinogenics. I believe so I know there's an indigenous people in Siberia. I think it's in other places as well. Where like long ago they think it was first observed. The Adamantia muscaria, also known as the fly agaric, it's a hallucinogenic mushroom. It's the Mario mushroom.
Ah, the red one with the spots.
And they think one of the because like traditionally the members of these groups would reindeer would eat these mushrooms and you would see that they were probably I'm not sure what a reindeer looks like when it's on mushrooms, so I would imagine it's different than how it normally looks. And there's some level they realized that they could then drink the urine of that reindeer. And that would sort of, I guess, has like filtered out or distilled the like psychedelic effects, the psilocybin in those mushrooms, and that would allow them to hallucinate. And it was like a fundamental aspect of some religions.
I need to find a time machine so I can go back in time right before the first person decided to drink deer pee. And like, wait, hold up there, buddy. I'm not gonna stop you, but I gotta know why.
Yeah, I mean, at the time when that would have had to have been a yeah. So I mean, they would I think they would filter it. I don't think it was just straight from the source.
Oh, okay, though that makes it. I mean, this is on the same list as
Yeah, I
the
believe it was the
people who.
Sami was the group. I could be wrong. And I think there may have been multiple other ones too.
This is on the same tier as the people who decided to keep drinking cow milk, only another step
Oh,
higher. Of like the
apparently, reindeer cannot walk and pee at the same time. So, like, they have to stop, which I guess would be very convenient if you're trying to like have
harvest.
your mushroom reindeer.
All right, boys, wait for us to start. On my mark.
So I don't know if that's what's going on with weird ear.
Like you go to the village, like, so why do you guys have a flute for the weird deer? Do you guys like call them over to ride them, or and they just look at each other?
Yes.
Sure, that's it. Yes, yes, 100%. Take this one and leave, and don't come back. They don't want you to find out about this. Hey, why are all these big mushrooms scattered around the area? Don't they have a use? Oh, they have a use, all right.
It's also impressive how much lichen constitutes the diet of caribou and reindeer in certain parts of the year in the winter specifically.
I mean, that makes sense given how lacking in nutrients the tundra can
But
be.
yeah, you're just scraping lichen off rocks though.
It's either that or die. It's either psychedelic mushrooms or lichen. You have no other option. You can either trip or you could eat lichen. Your call.
Yeah, also some caribou herds will migrate up to 3,000 miles a year.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah, they can travel 12 to 34 miles a day, and they can run 37 to 50 miles an hour.
Yeah, no, these things are built different, and I'm glad they have a Pokemon of it. Now we do have Colbane on Cobalion. How do you say it? Colbane?
Cobalion, yeah.
Cobalion. Thank you. But considering that the DLC is coming out, and we're going to get, oh, sorry, what is its stupid name now that it gets in the paradox form?
Iron Crown.
Iron Crown. Oh, for a split second, I thought it was Iron Justice, and I thought that would just be a really dumb superhero name that I would love to hear.
I like that name. I hope they
I want the name Iron Justice to be a thing really badly. Iron Crown is fine, but like, can you just imagine? Go Iron Justice, defeat him. Like, just I like that name a lot. I hate the iron naming thing so much, but it's so good.
I get that
It's
they're
so
supposed to
dumb.
be like code names, but at the same time, I it annoys me.
It's so boring. It's at least the other prehistoric ones have some class, but for
Honestly,
God's sake.
I agree with a hot take I heard the other day, and that's basically that the Paradox Pokemon are boring because they're just balls of stats with no ability.
From a design standpoint, I disagree. From
I
like an
agree with
actual
that
like
from a
yeah,
competitive.
from
I
a
would say from a
game,
competitive standpoint. From a game standpoint, they kind of are. Well, the good ones are. Iron Hands and Flutter Mane are just stats.
Brute Bonnet is a great example of that because with Brute Bonnet, it's like, oh no, we're going to literally max this out to make sure that its speed can never get too high. Like it was literally like
They made it.
mathematically
No, they made it
calculated.
faster than Amoonguss though. Oh, you mean so that it can't get a speed boost? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like they basically like this was literally tinkered with in a lab to make sure that the competitive players wouldn't run wild with it. I totally get where they're coming from. But we'll have more time to talk about that in the next episode. I'm sorry Chris couldn't be here, but I'm so glad you could help teach me more about deer. I needed the knowledge. I
No,
needed this. So thank you.
I really like deer. Like beyond just like, I just think they're a really interesting animal. They're fun to watch. They're so the fact that I think just a lot of it seems to be like sort of a universal appreciation throughout the world. I can't think of any area that's really like anti deer. If that makes sense, other than if they're eating your yard or something.
Or if like you hit them with your car and like your insurance isn't covering it, then you might feel animosity towards the deer. Although mainly I just get mad at insurance.
Yeah, and like I said, it's sort of a double-edged sword. Like one, it's great that they've rebounded so well, but one of the reasons why they've rebounded so well is because a lot of their natural predators have been hit pretty hard, particularly in like things like mountain lions in certain areas and wolves. So that's kind of one of the reasons why they came back so hard.
Yeah, and sometimes it came back so hard that like even Yellowstone was having issues like growing a lot of the different stuff out there because the deer kept eating it all, and so you need to kind of balance it out. It's not nature is never going to be easy, but I'm glad that they're still around, and I'm glad people throughout all of human history have learned to appreciate just how beautiful and weird they are, from their majestic, beautiful antlers to their psychedelic urine. So thank you so much for listening. Guys, have a fantastic rest of your day or night. We'll catch you guys before the holidays. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great day.